Welcome to the Beware the Moon podcast. My name is Hannah, and I am so sorry for my long absence. I've had a lot of stuff going on in my personal life, just all kinds of stuff. So thank you very much for your patience. We are back, though, today with Late Night with the Devil. So this movie came out this year. First, it kind of ran around kind of the indie circuits. Then it made a wide release in April. It is written, directed, and edited by both Colin and Cameron Cairns, and they are brothers. So this is very, very much so an indie, grassroots kind of movie. And that's not to say anything bad about it. I think it does excellently for what it has. This is not a big budget film. It's not a Blumhouse. It's not Paramount. It's not Spyglass. So, you can't expect a ton of really cool effects from it like you would in those movies, but the effects they do have, I think most of them work really well. And I also think that this story is intriguing and the acting is so good that it kind of like glosses over whatever they couldn't do as far as the budget goes. Starring David Dastmalchian, and this is his first leading role, which is very impressive. I distinctly remember his face from one of the Dark Knight movies, and he's in one of those as one of Joker's goons. We've got Laura Gordon and Ian Bliss in there as well. This movie is labeled a found footage movie, but I disagree. This kind of presents itself as if it's going to be a found footage movie, but then it completely moves away from in a found footage, your first person point of view, someone's holding a camera, you're talking into a camera knowing that there's a camera, and because of the setting, it's a 70s talk show. There are moments where they're talking directly into the camera, but every time they do a commercial break, they're really not looking into the camera. They're not talking to the camera. They're talking to each other, and you're following these characters around, and they're well set up shots, so it's not like shaky hand cam stuff. So I don't think calling it a found footage is really an appropriate category. I think probably they went with that because it's the closest they could think of, but it still doesn't quite fit. I would put this movie in the exorcism category before I would put it in the found footage category. So I wanted to talk about as well, there was apparently a little bit of controversy about some AI images. Supposedly there's only 3 AI images used, and they were all edited by a human being. Some people really, really hated that. Some people are okay with that. Most people don't know. I don't think it's really noticeable unless you're looking for it. I didn't notice the first couple times, but then when the images were pointed out to me specifically, I was like, okay, they're a little bit wonky, but not bad. I think the main issue people have with it, though, is, they used AI instead of hiring an artist. And to a certain extent, yes, that's bad. Don't do that. But like I said, this is a low-budget movie. It's not like it's Blumhouse. They're not shafting anyone. They're not trying to shaft anyone. In a lower-budget movie, you're kind of like, you're trying to pinch your pennies. You're trying to save your bucks where you can. It's tough because, yes, AI as art is garbage. However, this movie is also extremely low budget. It's got like 9 different production companies, so it's kind of like, hey, you chip in $100, I'll chip in $100, eventually we'll get this movie made. So it's not like Blumhouse is out here just trying to pinch pennies, or Paramount or something like that, Fox or whatever. This is a small production from indie filmmakers, so it's not to excuse it, but I get it. And I heard some people were trying to boycott this movie, or saying everyone should boycott it over this controversy, and I disagree. Like I said, this is a small budget movie. These tiny production companies, you're going to absolutely stomp them into the ground, whereas it's not, like I said, it's not like Blumhouse. If Blumhouse was doing something like this, everybody could tweet at them and they would fix it. They would change it. These guys don't have the money for that. They're small indie filmmakers. For whatever reason, the horror genre gets shafted a lot. So if you're boycotting a small indie horror film, they're not going to look at that and go, oh, they're protesting AI art. They're going to look at that and go, oh, okay, small indie horror films just don't do well. That's how they're going to translate that, because media and Hollywood and all those people who decide what to make and what not to make, they're stupid like that. I don't know why. Horror is literally the consistent moneymaker in the market right now, and they still continue to shit on it. So in this case, and you definitely have to look at everything case by case, because there's always exceptions to things, there's always other factors to consider. So I think in this case, okay, whatever, they used AI images, not that bad. Again, if it were a bigger production company, or it were more images, if it was some big part of the movie, first of all, it would just look like shit because it's AI. But then second of all, you're stealing from artists. And like I said, it just looks like shit. Like, AI art is garbage. So use real people to do real art, okay? But don't shit on small production movies, don't shit on small movies in order to get your point across, because that's not going to happen. You'll end up sending the wrong message to the wrong people, and the people who need to hear your message are going to be completely ignoring it entirely. Kind of like with the Helldivers 2 situation. If you don't know about that, look into it. Yeah, that's what I have to say on the AI thing. Apparently, the other thing about this movie is that it definitely differs from late night TV shows from the 70s. It's got a lot of the same vibes, of course, and it's got a lot of the same spirit, but it's not exactly how things were done back then. Personally, I don't really care. I just really like this premise. Like I said, it's got a very cool 70s vibe. It's a live talk show, which I think is a unique premise. It's kind of one of those, David Letterman or, late night Jay Leno type shows, where you invite guests on and you have interviews and all that kind of stuff. And it's very much set up like every single one of those that you've ever seen. You've got your host, your co-host, who's a funny guy, got his own gimmick maybe. You've got a live band playing music for the different segments. Then you've got a couple of different people to interview, and then you've got a musical guest at the end. And that's the same setup here. So I think it's a very fun setup to play with. I think so. They use mostly practical effects, and some are great and some are not great. Just kind of depends. And that to me is not. I think the story, and there's enough good effects and good scares and good tension that you can kind of just gloss over the bad ones. It's got great acting, a good script. And it's not thought heavy. So like, you're not trying to pick your brain apart, trying to figure out the message of this movie. And it's not something that like you go away from and you're having nightmares about that night. Like, this is definitely one of those horror movies that you could watch with a non-horror movie fan friend. I kind of think of them as like nonsense horror, gateway horror movies. Some of those are like Insidious or the Conjuring movies, but this is much better than Insidious and the fucking Door, or whatever that movie was called that came out last year. Much better. So pick this over one of those two if you've got to show a horror movie to a non-horror movie fan friend. So that is my general review. Getting into the spoiler section now, we get this opening montage of things happening in the 70s, as well as an overview of our main character, Jack Delroy. He goes from radio host to late night show host. He's got high ratings, but never higher than Carson. There's a whole thing about this, the Grove is what they call it. And it's this like, everyone says it's like this cult of rich guys who get together and they do all this weird stuff. And it's very secretive society type stuff. And you can, when Jack is sitting at his desk, and they're doing the scene where he's, signing the contract, you can hear someone go, "What'd you have to sacrifice to get here?" Which comes back later on. But he's, we're just getting a good overview right now. So the Grove cult, he's got connections there. So there are people wonder if that's how he got this job. But But anyway, he's doing good at it. Then his wife is diagnosed with lung cancer, even though she's not a smoker, and it's like terminal, and she has very little time all of a sudden left. She comes on the show. Ratings are higher than ever, still not better than Carson. Then 2 weeks later, after she's off the show, she dies. And Jack is supposedly devastated. He leaves for a month and then comes back, and the next year is a hot mess for him. His show is just like tanking in the views. So he starts openly courting controversy to try and drag the ratings up. You see him like arm wrestling a little person, and he's got like an alt pop star on there. And just different things to try and get a little bit of controversy, because then maybe people will watch. It doesn't really work. And there's a good reference there to Madonna taking Letterman to the cleaners in an interview on the Letterman show, which was really, really funny. It's a really great watch. I'm not a Madonna fan, but that was fucking hilarious. If you haven't seen that, go look it up. And this takes us up to Halloween of 1977 and the events that happened that night that have supposedly never been seen. They were aired that night live, and everybody has been hush-hush about them since. And the narrator who's narrating all this says you also get the behind-the-scenes footage. And again, not really found footage style, either of those. And the late night talk show thing, the footage from that I could consider found footage because it's a late night talk show. However, it's the in-between shots that they're not found footage at all. So cut to Halloween night, 1977, and we have Gus, Jack's right-hand man, opening up the night, lining up the speakers, the interviewers. He's got, we have Cleo coming on to do our outro song, and he's like, "Where's Jack?" They open the door Jack's supposed to come out of, and he's not there. And he's like, Jack. And then Jack pops up behind him in a bed sheet and scares him, which it's a very fun, goofy thing, but it's kind of a dick move considering Gus is like genuinely scared. And he's on live television, so it's not like he can react genuinely. Like, he can't be like, "Fucking asshole." So he just kind of takes it in stride, which kind of sets up Gus's character for this movie. That's him this whole movie, is like, you can see he wants to react a certain way, and he fucking doesn't because they're live, and also it's his job. Gus is playing the theremin at some point in this intro, and the theremin is an instrument that you play without touching it. I have no idea how that works, but it's an electrical instrument, and I went to Google what it was called because I forgot what it was called. And so I Googled, what instrument is Gus playing in Late Night with the Devil? And Google said that people also ask, is Gus the devil in Home Alone? And that had me dead. That has nothing to do with this movie. All the other people also asked had everything to do with Late Night with the Devil, not that one. And just, that one got me. It was pretty fucking, I was like, what? But also, yeah, he is. They're right. He absolutely is. Jack does his welcome and his thank you to the Night Owls, which is his talk show people. He tells them there's a very special show tonight. It's sweeps week, meaning this is kind of do or die for Jack since the ratings are so low for the show and he needs to get his ratings up. Also, there's a fun name drop in there because he's talking about sweeps week. Ooh, and then he's like, "Where's Vincent Price when you need him?" And if you don't know who that is, you should just look it up. It's the guy who does the voice in Thriller for Michael Jackson. And, like, I loved Vincent Price. I think his voice was great. I think we need another Vincent Price. I don't know who's going to take that mantle. Maybe Tony Todd. Maybe Tobin Bell. I don't know, but we need another Vincent Price, like a voice of horror. Anyhow, Jack talks about there's an interest in the occult rising, and so he's got this guest on because it's spooky night, it's Halloween night, and this guy is a psychic, so they play a theme for him that seems like a bit Arabic. It's very, like, clarinet heavy. This guy's name is Christou, and he's supposed to be a medium. Jack asks him some questions, and Christou explains Halloween is an excellent night for the spirits. It's kind of like a last call of sorts. the use of masks is supposedly to hide from angry spirits, which ties into the story, but that's only kind of partially true. The Celtic origin of Halloween, they thought that the fair folk, the elves, would come out of the woods, and the fairies, that is, actually, and that there's good fairies and there's bad fairies, so to make the fairies on your side, you would leave bowls of food and offerings in front of your house at night, so they would come and take as they pleased, but you also went and took because you had to wear a mask because you wanted to blend in with the fairies because it was the one night of the year that they were allowed to come into the town. So you're tricking the evil spirits and you're tricking the fairies into thinking you're one of them in order to avoid their wrath, and then you're also leaving out candy for them or goods, bread, anything like that, which is why they say trick or treat, because you're either going to give us a treat or you're going to get punished. So Jack asks Christu, do you hear these voices all the time? Do they just, never shut up? How do you get to sleep? And Christu says it's kind of like a radio. He can just switch it off whenever he wants, which, I don't know, that just, I feel like if psychic abilities are real, that's not how they work. Christu then makes an excellent show of turning on his psychic energies, and he's really just hamming it up, and he's like, I sense the letter P, and he's like, Peterson, and someone's like, oh, Peterman was my wife's maiden name, and this guy that gets picked from the audience, he says his name's Barry. He's fucking hilarious, and also the worst person that Christu could have picked. He's like, oh yeah, my wife ran off with the neighbor, 10 years ago or whatever, and they're like, oh, I'm so sorry, and he's like, don't be, my golf game's never been better, and you're like, this fucking guy, he gives not a shit, and he's clever, and those are the two things you don't want when you pick someone to be speaking on a live television show. But it's super fucking awesome for the audience, both at home, quote unquote, and in the studio, quote unquote, and then also for the viewer of everything. Christu then manages, he's like, I think Christu kind of senses that this guy is not, it's not it, he's not feeling it. So then he's like, oh, the connection is lost, sorry, I'm just a messenger. And then he starts getting another message, and he pulls this really touching moment from these two audience members. It's a mother and a daughter, and they're, the mother's son, the daughter's brother, they lost him to suicide. And so he comforts them, gives them a message from him. Everyone is very impressed, except probably Carmichael in the back is rolling his eyes, which we'll get to meet Carmichael in a second. They're about to break for commercial, but then Christu gets, hounded by a spirit, just oh man, it's intense. Spirit is basically demanding to be heard. He says it's someone named Minnie looking for a single man with a wedding ring, and Jack, he's like, it's Minnie, and Jack's trying to offer Mandy or Millie, and he's like, no, it's Minnie, definitely Minnie. He says there's so much sadness, and he's talking about, single man wearing a wedding ring, and then there's a surge of a surge of electricity through the studio, and then his eyes roll into the back of his head, and I don't know how they fucking did it, but it's so gross, and I hate it. I hate shit like that. So it was really good, and then you realize, okay, he's not faking. He's not entirely a charlatan. Maybe he's pulling some things out of his butt, but he's not entirely false. So the spirit leaves when no one accepts the quote-unquote call. And Christu's very shaken up, so Jack just breaks to commercial, and Jack does that really well and really quickly and right at the precise moments he needs to, which is good. So he takes it to commercial. We get the first commercial break shot, and this is when you get that weird transition. So instead of looking through the lens of one of the cameras that's filming for the show, we're looking at a handheld, not handheld, a classic movie point of view. So it's kind of hard to describe, I guess, because I don't know technical terms, because I just can't remember them, but my bad. But yeah, so first commercial break, and it turns to black and white, so you always know when it's like commercial break, you always know when it's kind of from the perspective of just the crew, and not like it's what the crew is seeing and hearing and observing, and what Jack and Leo and all of them are seeing and hearing and observing, versus like what's actually being broadcast. That's the difference there. Nailed it. There you go. And it's not entirely found footage because A, it's the 70s, there's no handhelds, and then also this kind of camera work would not have, like, there would be no one following them around with a camera at this time. And B, it's too professional and personal a footage to be found footage. It's none of that janky, jerky stuff you typically find. It's very stable, it's normal camera work. So Gus asks Jack about whatever he and Leo have cooked up, quote, when that girl comes on. He tells them everyone is spooked, but Leo swiftly interrupts and tells him to get the hell to wardrobe. I love Leo. The acting choices for Leo are so amazing. Like, the character is just so fun. Like, he's such a dick, but he's so fun. He looks at Christy and he's like, you look kind of rough. You know, would you like a bourbon? And he asks for water, and Leo goes, in this place? I'll see what I can do. And that's, like, the best. So then he calls someone over and is like, Mr. Christo would like water. And he, like, is like, oh, you're gonna stay on longer, right? And Christy's like, no, I really should get going. And he pats him on the back and he's like, that's the spirit. Just completely fucking ignores him to get what he needs out of him. And that's another thing about this movie, is literally everyone except Gus is someone who's trying to get something from someone. And doing so in a selfish way. Gus is the only one who's trying to set things right. He's the only one who's, you know, speaking on behalf of everyone. He's the only one who's like, we can stop this. It's fine. Like, we don't need to do this. Everyone else is convinced they need to do it because they want something out of it. And I think that's an interesting aspect to this film. It's not like something really deep. It's just interesting. So the other thing, when Leo convinces Christo to stay on longer, he's like, here, you got some blood under your nose, which is, again, how you know he's not entirely a charlatan. So he gives him a handkerchief for the nosebleed, and then him and Jack walk off. And Jack's like, that bit with the lights was you're doing, right? And he's like, if you liked it, yeah, I'll take full credit. And that's like, if you miss that line, you don't realize that the crew does not know what the fuck is happening with, like, the electric and shit like that. But that line is really funny, and I love that insert, and it's just very telling as well. So I just love that. Leo says they're running late, and Jack says, we're not bumping Cleo again, which is the lady at the very end who's supposed to sing a song for them. And I think that's really funny because that comes back. So just put that in your little hat. So Jack and Leo have some fun back and forth. And I think that's just them in general. Like, I love Leo and Jack's dialogue, and Leo brings out a little bit more of Jack's true character, which is a dick. He seems to only care about what he cares about, which is Ricky Bobby style. If you ain't first, you're last. He wants to be number one. So they have some back and forth. Really, it's just dialogue about the show and how it's running. And then June, and he's like, everything is running fine. And then Leo literally goes, everything is running fine. And then he turns and he goes, what the hell is going on with those lights? And it's just, again, really fun characterization. I love Leo's character. He's so fun, even though he's such an asshole. Christo, we get back on stage and Christo seems highly agitated, possibly having a crisis, but they carry on with the show. We get the welcome back card, which these welcome back cards are the AI generated images, like a couple of, just three of them. Again, just three of them. So they're okay. But I think it's fun because, like, you would have those, especially they're Halloween themed. So, welcome back card, and then we get introduced to Carmichael Haig, who, Carmichael the Conjurer is what he used to be called. He used to have a show in Vegas. He can do group hypnosis. This guy is, like, a really good sleight of hand magician. And he does this cigar trick where he somehow gets a cigar in his hand and lights it, and you're just like, how the fuck did he get the cigar? Where did it come from? Same with the light. You're very confused. And I love this guy because he's such a dick, but he's so convinced that he's doing things right and for the right reasons, and I would argue he's doing them for the right reasons. He's just going about it the wrong way, and he's just like an ass hat. Like, there's like different levels of asshole and dick and stuff like that. Like the piece of shit scale is really large, and like Leo is he's probably like asshole, dead asshole, like dead ass asshole. That makes no sense. I'm so sorry. I'm trying to explain myself. It's getting worse. He's basically just like your normal asshole, but he can be personable. Then there's Carmichael, who's a dick. And that is just someone who can't be personable and is also an asshole. That's where Carmichael is. He's 0% personable, complete asshole. He's the head of this scientific investigation into the paranormal that he started, which is based off of a real thing. There was really a guy who said, if anyone can prove to me that without a shadow of a doubt, you know, that they do have some kind of supernatural ability, I'll give them $1 million. And that guy died without ever having to give up that $1 million. So, and I love that this show takes things from real life and sprinkles them in there. Like we get, like in the next instance, they're showing Carmichael doing different things. And one of the things he's doing is he's ghost hunting at the Amityville house. And it's this really shitty, like, Photoshop job. Like, you can tell he's composited in there, or, like, you know, just, like, Photoshopped in there in front of the Amityville house. And it's just fucking hilarious. And I love it. It's so good. Like, you can tell he doesn't belong in those photos, but it's so fun. I don't even give a shit. So then Carmichael kind of explains his point of view and where he's at. And he openly, like, calls Christou, like, a swindler and a thief, basically. Carr says that he flopped no less than 5 times and that he just got lucky with the dead son and dead brother thing. He says both he and Christou are swindlers and fakes, but he's open about it versus Christou pretending to be on the up with it. Christou gets pissed, splashes water in Carr's face, and is about to leave, but then Jack is like, wait, let's discuss that last reading. And then he's like, I think it might have been meant for me. Minnie was my private nickname for my wife, Madeline. And I'm a single man, but I'm still wearing my wedding ring. So all those things kind of fit with me. So that does get Christou to stop and ponder. And so Carmichael is just complaining about the statistics of it all. He's like, you know, he's bound to get something right, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, some idiot always jumps in and claims they're the one. And he's like, don't be that idiot, Jack. So as he's, like, saying that, Christou starts puking up some black tar-looking stuff, and it's not a great effect. I wish it had been practical. It's not, but, you know, whatever. They're setting up a shot like that, and then resetting the set, and then, you know, if you fuck it up, you've got to redo it. That costs way more money than just CGing it in there. So, I get it. It's just... A lot of my complaints about this movie are I wish they had had a bigger budget, because... everything else about it is great. It's just they needed a bigger budget. So Christou pukes up that stuff, and he, like, his voice, like, doubles over, and he's like, something's not right, and you can, as he's yelling it, you can see a vein in his neck. Ugh, so gross. Then they cut to commercial, and it's so funny because while they're carting Christou away, Gus takes over crowd control for the live audience, and he's like, the first thing he says to them is, the Surgeon General strongly suggests taking Pepto-Bismol before communicating with the dead. Is anybody here out of town? And I was like, how did he come up with that line so fast? It's so good. Gus is literally the unsung hero of this fucking movie. It's so good. So after Christou's carted away, Carmichael confronts Jack about the Minnie situation, saying, like, he set it up. And he's like, you know, I didn't think you would stoop this low. I thought your friends in the Grove could help you out. And he's like, you're overestimating their influence. And he's like, maybe I wouldn't if you set me up with them. You know, I'd like to join sometime. I hear they do those rituals and, you know, have lots of parties and orgies. And he's like, mainly I'm interested in the orgies. And you're like, wow, okay. And Jack's like, yeah, I'll see what I can do. Walks over to Leo and immediately goes, told you not to leave me alone with that asshole. And then Leo goes, what am I, your mother? And then he starts letting Jack know what's going on behind the scenes, which is the studio is getting tons of calls. People are upset, confused. They want to know what the heck is happening to Christou, which is not bad news according to Leo and Jack, because it means people are watching and they're getting those ratings are going up. If people are watching and they're calling in and interacting with the show, that looks really good for the show. So when they come back on, Jack assures everyone Christou is receiving medical attention. Carmichael assures everyone he's completely fine because it's, an old trick from different performers called spouting. Jack's like, well, do you still have that check? And he's like, it's in your pocket. And he pulls the check out of his jacket pocket. And it's just like, I love the dumb little magic tricks Carmichael does because he's just an asshole. And he fucking can, so he does. Before Jack can intro the next guest, though, you hear a siren wail. And Jack, you can tell Jack hears it. He pauses for a second to listen. Then he starts talking about, this book came across my desk that I haven't been able to stop thinking about. Conversations with the Devil by Dr. June Ross Mitchell. She's the next guest, but Jack has a clip to show first. And then we get this fun, it's like part documentary, part police footage of this cult. And it's the cult of Abraxas. And the guy who runs it his last name's Diabo, which is like the funnest thing. Like, it's such a fun name. I want to say it's made up. I didn't look into it because I want it to be made up, but I don't know. I just didn't want to look into it because it'd be sad. He's their leader, this guy whose last name is Diabo. And he talks about how Abraxas demands sacrifice, blah, blah, blah. He will give you great riches, but demands sacrifice, and there's concern that children are being bred for sacrifice in the cult. So eventually they're having this standoff with the police, and after a few days of this standoff, the cult leader decides everybody should set themselves and the house on fire. So that's what they do. There's only one survivor, and it's this little girl. Her name is Lily, and she has a demon inside of her, as one would expect from a little girl surviving a fire. And I love the acting choices of the girl who plays Lily. She does the fucking creepy kid thing, and she does so good with it. I wish that the Pet Sematary remake had cast this girl, because she is so good. My biggest complaint about the Pet Sematary remake, aside from them blowing everything in the trailers, is that the little girl's not scary. And it's because they give her all these lines and all these acting cues that are so aggressive. And to me, a child being aggressive is mostly just, at worst, it's annoying. I can take a little 10-year-old girl. Whatever. That's not scary to me. But this girl, she's older, granted, but she has some, just the way her physical acting is, her expressions, her tone, she does a really great job. So she gets introduced, shakes Jack's hand, sits down, and she supposedly doesn't know where to look. And because she's a possessed kid, it's fucking creepy. She's looking at the wrong cameras. Whenever they switch, the one thing that is really unnerving about it is they'll randomly, all TV shows do, they'll randomly switch views, which camera they're using. So they'll go camera 1 to camera 2, and she always fucking knows, and she always looks at the camera that's actually broadcasting them. And I love that. Such a good little detail, and that's why it's so creepy. Lily drops what June thinks of Jack, which is, she's like, June thinks you're handsome, Jack. And then she gives her condolences to Jack over his dead wife, which is kind of nice, but the way she segued into it, maybe a little rough. Then she tells him, I don't think you need to worry about your show, Jack, because I think you're going to be very famous soon. Fucking ominous as shit, y'all. And then, right before we cut to the next commercial break, the camera behind Lily is the one broadcasting, and she looks over her shoulder and stares at it, right in the fucking lens, man. It is so creepy, and it's so good, and such a good choice. So then they take a break, and she's like, which camera do I look at now? And he's like, we're off air, so none of them. And yeah, she would be confused about that. Then he's like, oh, we gotta look pretty, time to make ourselves pretty again. And she says, don't you already think I'm pretty, Jack? Something like that. And she says it not in her voice, and you can tell Jack is like, what the fuck? He turns and he's like, yeah, you're pretty. June snags Jack, though, before he can, like, lean too much into it, and she's like, I don't want to go through with it, because whatever it is, you know, at this point, she's like, I don't want to go through with it because Lily's becoming unpredictable. Apparently, she went into a fugue state and just started saying Jack's name, and June says it was like she was recalling something, which is, these are all, like, fun details in retrospect, and then fun details the second watch. So this movie is definitely worth at least 2 watches. I've watched it a third time, and I've noticed more things in the third watch. So, like, there's more to pick up on. It's good. It's not just a one and done kind of thing. So Jack reminds her that she said she was ready. She said they were ready, and he's like, this is your big break. This is what's gonna, make you make it. And June says she had a lapse in judgment. Still doesn't want to go through with it, but then Leo interrupts quietly. Like, he's just standing there, and she notices him, and she walks away. And then he and Jack have an exchange. They got a call from the hospital, and Leo tells Jack that Christou is dead. He goes, Jack's like, I thought Carmichael said it was just spouting. And he goes, yeah, apparently he was spouting from everywhere, and they couldn't get it to stop. He died on the way to the hospital. Jack wants them to keep quiet about Christou dying because everybody's already kind of freaked out, especially Gus. And Leo's like, I can't make any promises. Like, you know how fast word travels. Then Phil, the stage manager, says, like, he cuts in and he says, there's something weird on the monitor or in the electric or in the sound or something, but they're not seeing it. Tells his camera guys to keep it rolling. It'll be fine. He'll work it out. So then we have Carmichael's talking to the mother and daughter about, oh, did you guys, fill out a questionnaire? And the mother and daughter of the suicided deceased son/brother are like, oh yeah, we filled out this questionnaire. And then there was a lady asking us questions too. It was the same lady who came out to help Mr. Christou. And he's like, thank you. Jack resumes his seat and Lily asks if everything's okay. And he's like, oh yeah, everything's fine. So then they get into the interview. They resume broadcasting, get into the interview with June, and she's very touchy about her doctor title. She's like, I am a doctor. This is my science. This is what we research. And it's basically like paranormal phenomena. And Carr interrupts like 5 times, of course, before she's done even explaining her job. So they quiet him. She's like, is it even worth talking if this idiot's just gonna keep interrupting? And so Jack's like, shut your fucking mouth. And he's like, okay, fine. So June continues to explain her job and the science of it. They're like, oh yeah, you study possessions. And she goes, we pretend. Basically, that's what it is in real life. But like, she's like, we prefer calling it psychic infestation. Okay, call it what you want, buddy, but it's still fucking possession, and that girl is still gonna eat your ass, and not in a sexy way. June says the demon inside Lily is a minor one that serves Abraxas, and not Abraxas himself, though. Carmichael calls her gullible, and then she fucking puts him in his place. It's so good. And then they've got, like, an assortment of different stuff from the cult on the table, and Carmichael picks up the sacrificial dagger and he pretends to be possessed by Abraxas, and everyone's like, oh, and then he's like, Carmichael, knock it off. And he's like, yeah, I was just kidding, but you guys are a very suggestible bunch, good to know. And they're like, what the fuck, man? Like, she's literally like, we're not here for your entertainment, Mr. Carmichael. So apparently this is when we have the discussion about who Abraxas is. Apparently he's a showman. He craves an audience, is what Carmichael says. And I don't know if this is just like Carmichael did his homework, he looked into this beforehand, or he just knows these things because he studies them. But he also knows, and so does Lily, that Abraxas is where the term abracadabra comes from. And then Lily's like, I call the demon inside of me Mr. Wriggles, which I think is better than Mr. Howdy. But whatever. And she says it's because he kind of wriggles in and out of her mind. And then she goes, June says everyone has a demon inside of them, but we can't always control them. And like, woo, holy shit, that's a good line. Also has to do with the ending and the theory about everything. and what the fuck all this means. So at that moment, Gus's instrument goes haywire, the theremin, and Carmichael has to unplug it because it's popping glass. It's like shrill and high pitched, and it's popping glass. And he's like, it's a sound system error. It's because it was playing back through the PA system. And Lily says it was Mr. Wriggles. And so Carmichael's like, you're full of shit, kid. And then Jack's like, can we invite Mr. Wriggles onto the show? And Lily is like, down to clown, but June is like, hell no. And then he's like, I think the audience would really like to see it. And the fucking audience peer pressures her into it. What a dumb bitch. Like, I'm sorry. What are you, 15? Lord have mercy. So she agrees to it, but on the condition that she has everyone's full cooperation. Literally everyone. The audience, the crew, everyone on set, on stage. And they're like, oh yeah. So then they cut to commercial. And Gus is clearly not happy as the lights begin to dim. June is also pissed. She's like, you fucking asshole, you cornered me into this. And Carmichael is so funny. He points out that it didn't take much convincing, and I was like, damn, he's fucking right, though. And Gus is pissed because he knows about Christu and doesn't like that they're fucking with the devil. Gus be scared, and he's like, rightfully so. He begs. It's so sad because he begs Jack to stop. Like, he knows that there's like a point of no return coming, and he's like, you're not a bad man, Jack. You need to stop. You can stop this. And Jack is like convinced this is gonna save the fucking show, so he's like, I'm trying to save our jobs. Like, shut the fuck up. And then Leo interrupts them and gets them moving their asses, so Jack doesn't have to deal with Gus anymore at the moment. So they're back onto the show, back broadcasting, and we've got this cool, eerie lighting. The ladies are in chairs facing each other, and Lily's restrained to her chair. Jorn, let's go, Jorn. June warns them about manifesting the demon through Lily. So she's like, she might say horrible things, do horrible things, so we've got to strap down, but just be prepared to be affronted, basically, by the demon. She says something as well about, like, I hold the key, thinking, like, she is the key to the doorway between Mr. Wriggles and the real world, or, like, the physical realm, I guess. And it's so funny because control is an illusion. It's the biggest illusion there is. So I think if anything, like, there's like a real undercurrent right there of like, control is the biggest illusion. It's not like a big message that the movie's trying to convey, but it's there in little bits and pieces. June kind of hypnotizes Lily to recede and brings out Mr. Wriggles, and there's some very Exorcist inspired makeup and looks going on. It's very good physical acting and acting in general from the actress who plays Lily. She's phenomenal in this role. She does really good. They've got like the double voiceover thing going on, and the demon's like panicking, and June's like, we brought you to this realm to better understand your purpose. And immediately Mr. Wriggles stops moving, like trying to get free, and goes, he's here, isn't he? And then turns to look at Jack, and he's like, good to see you again, Jack. And he's like, I don't believe we've met before. And she's like, oh, but we have, among the tall trees. And then Lily starts being vulgar about June and Jack, and she's like, you better be careful, June. You know what happened to his last whore. He's free to, use another one however he wants. And then she starts singing. Jack and June went up the hill to fuck each other's brains out, and they miss the bleep the first time, and then they catch it the second time as if it's like real broadcasting. And then June gets upset and slaps her, which is like really kind of fucked up. But Lily starts talking and is like, why would you do that? And she's like, I'm so sorry, Lily. And then like leans forward, and there's a really, really good jump scare with a really good demon face. I wanted more of this other demon face because it's fucking good. The very small glimpse you get to see of it in that moment is so cool looking. It's like an extra smile, lots of teeth. I just love it. June then exorcises the demon from Lily. And this is kind of the debate people have, and it has to do with like different theories. So there are some people who think Lily was possessed before even coming onto the show and that she was never actually in charge. Some people think that this is when Lily gets taken over by the demon completely. Some people think it's later, but just note that this is one of the instances where people are like, maybe she's demon possessed after this too. Because she says, "How could you let it happen, Jack?" And it's not her voice or the demon's voice anymore. Then we get some fun surging lights. The chair begins to float. Lily has a nosebleed, and Mr. Wriggles just decides to piss off. And everybody's like really stunned, even Jack. But he recovers quickly enough to be host. And Carmichael's like, "This is bullshit," basically. He's like, "Oh, this lights and da-da-da." And so he wants to like burn the witches, basically. And, you know, he's like, "You'll get your chance to prove them wrong after a message from our sponsors." Which must be so fucking annoying as like a live broadcasting late show host. But gotta do what you gotta do. So when we take the commercial break, we can see that even the crew is a little taken aback. Carmichael is jumping down Jack's throat, so Leo distracts him with his own vanity. He's like, "Oh, you know, you've got some sweat up there." And so someone comes over to, you know, dab that away for him. Jack speaks with June, and he's like so excited about what happened. He's like, "Maybe you guys can be regulars," which is just like the wildest. What? Like, The Exorcist has already come out at this point, so, like, what? But luckily, June is super focused. She's like, what did he mean by the tall trees? And he's like, "I don't know." And she's like, "Whatever, Jack, this isn't a parlor trick. This is, like, real shit." And we see in the, like, a couple of cuts that Lily's giving Phil, who's one of the stagehands. I think he's like one of the managers on set, but he's trying to get her loose from her restraints, and she is just giving him some nasty looks and then claims he's hurting her, which interrupts Jack and June's conversation. So Jack comes over and he's like, "I got this," and he takes out the sacrificial dagger and cuts off the restraints for her. Leo interrupts to let Jack know that 3 of the crew walked off, but, you know, everybody's lighting up their boards, you know, they're back, baby, you know, everybody wants to sign him, and they're excited, but then Jack really takes in what the fuck just happened, and Leo is his reaction is so good, just like the acting in it. He's like, "I know, how did she do that?" And it's so good, and I'm like, buddy, what? Jack thinks she sounded like Minnie, and so he's kind of like freaked out when he realizes that, but then Leo is like, "You know what, if Minnie were here, she'd tell him to get out there, Mr. Midnight, and knock him dead." And Jack has officially been rallied, and, you know, before they get back on air, Leo reminds Jack that he's still holding the dagger. So he sets it off to the side, and, you know, he welcomes everybody back and starts with an apology for offending any viewers, but then kicks it to Lily to see if she's okay. And there's just like one shot of Gus where he is looking skeptical, like, "Okay, she's fucking okay." Lily apologizes on behalf of Mr. Wriggles, but Mr. Carmichael Haig interrupts and is like, "This is bullshit." He's like, "My chief concern is this young girl's well-being." And June comes in and she's like, "How dare you?" And she's like, "We're family, basically." And she like reaches over to touch Lily's arm, and Lily scoots her arm away. And it's just like a really good, subtle thing that I absolutely fucking love. And that's the other thing is, like, at this point, you're not sure if Lily, I have a feeling she is fully with it, but I do think that, I mean, she's grown up with this demon's voice in her head, so kind of, you know, a little bit, kind of skews her view on things. So, Carmichael believes everything was hypnosis, and he says he can do the same shit, and he's happy to prove it. And he's like, "I need a volunteer," and Gus scoffs at him, and he goes, "Thank you, Gus." Poor guy. So then we get this really cool hypnosis scene, and it's so funny because they sit in the same chairs downstage with the same mood lighting, and they've got smoke machines, and Carmichael's like, you know, "Atmosphere doesn't hurt, isn't that right, Dr. June?" And so he's like, Jack goes, where there's, you know what they say in TV land, where there's a smoke, there's probably a smoke machine. And Carmichael goes, my compliments to the producer. And it's just like the way he does it is so good. And then he starts hypnotizing both Gus and the audience, and he's like, I need close-ups on my watch, and it's a hypnosis watch. Gus starts getting hot and then freaking out, and then worms are coming out of his stomach and out of his face, and then Carmichael is like, sleeper here, awake, and everything's fine. Nothing's wrong with Gus. His shirt is unbuttoned, and he's confused why that is, but he's totally okay. And something that I forgot to point out is right before they started, he goes, you know, my wife really likes the way my head sits on my shoulders. Hope you're not planning to make my head spin, are you? And Carmichael goes, oh, I'm planning to make everyone's head spin. And so it's just like, it's gonna come back later, you know? So everyone's confused, like, how the fuck did we all see the worms and everything? And he's totally fine. And so they play it back, and it was hypnosis. Woo! And the scary thing is, hypnosis is real. I think a lot of people think it's some weird conspiracy, but no, hypnosis is real. People can do that kind of shit to you, and you don't even fucking know it. That's the scary thing. So after watching the playback, Lily makes a very valid point. If their shit was hypnosis, it would play back normal. And so Jack's like, you know, June's like, we're not doing that. Like, it's time to go, blah, blah, blah. And Jack's like, yeah, it is time to go, and it's time for Cleo's segment. But I think we can't leave the audience hanging like this. I think we need to play back that segment. And so, bye, Cleo. She gets bumped again. Fucking Cleo. She's never going to show up here again. So they play it back, and it's not normal. It's playing back the way everyone remembers it. And Carmichael's like, I need to have my team analyze this as forensics, blah, blah, blah. And Jack thinks he sees something weird in the static, so he has them rewind it, and they go frame by frame. And we see a very, very bad ghost of Madeline, just standing behind Jack, touching his shoulder. And I hate the image there. I just think it's really hokey looking. Like, I don't know what it is about it. It's just not a scary ghost, and then it looks like it's been photoshopped in. So that's kind of disappointing, but it doesn't detract from the movie, of course. But seeing Madeline's ghost, Carmichael's like, this is a setup. The audience is all aflutter, and Lily doesn't like that. She wants everyone to know the truth. And she puts her head down, and when she comes back up, she's possessed. So my theory is that she allows Mr. Wriggles to take over on purpose here. People are like, was she possessed the whole time? Was she possessed since after the first possession on set? Does she invite Wriggles back? I think it's that third one. I don't think she was possessed since the day before. Again, this girl has grown up with this voice in her head, and this demon is very purposeful. So my guess is that this demon has kind of woven some of his ideologies into her brain without her knowing it, and has woven some of his will into her brain without her knowing it. And that's what I think is happening here. She wants everyone to believe in Mr. Wriggles, so she invites him back, which of course is fucked. Everything goes bonanza. Her head splits open, which is really fun, and there's like light coming out of it. She's being electrocuted by all the electricity on set. Gus stands up and tries to "The power of Christ compels you," and she twists his head around, and he falls into the table, and the glass just shatters, and Jack's like, Gus! So then June, takes her shot, pulls out her weird little symbol necklace, and tries to, get the demon away, but the demon, like, it looks like an invisible hand basically is grabbing the necklace and yanking it upward, and then it like starts cutting through her throat, and before it starts cutting through her throat, she's just suspended there by the necklace in the air, and Carmichael gets down and he starts pledging his allegiance to this fucking demon, and you're like, oh Lord. It's so fucking funny because it's so unlike his character, what we've seen, but also it makes sense. And so the demon fucking slices her throat with a necklace. She falls to the ground and Carmichael's just like, oh shit. So then he pulls out his check and offers it to the demon. And if you're looking at the subtitles, the demon literally says abracadabra, and then the fucking check burns away, and then Carmichael starts to burn away. And it's just like, oh, it's so fucking fun. Jack tries to escape, and Leo's like helps him through the door he usually enters and exits the show from. But then things get really fucky for Jack. He goes through like different skits on the show. He's confused and scared. He's telling people to turn off their televisions. Everything is really weird. He's just going through different moments in the movie that we've already seen. So he's confused. No one's acknowledging what he's saying. So that's not good. And then finally we get to him signing the contract for being the late show host, and you hear that guy from the beginning go, Jack, what did you have to sacrifice to get here? And the guy who's standing there, the executive, waiting for him to sign the contract, goes, oh, Jack Delroy's biggest sacrifice has yet to come, and hands him a cup. And then there's a really good transition where the desk and all the furniture and everything are kind of pulled away, and suddenly he's in a forest, and there's all these cult guys from the Grove there, and Diabo's there, and they make him, drink from this cup, and when he does, they all do their weird owl noises because they're owl heads. And if you look at a lot of the cult stuff, owls are really big in cults. So that's pretty fucking spooky. So then he hears a voice, and it's Minnie. And she's like on her deathbed, and she says, she thought they wouldn't let him see her, and she basically explains to him, spells it out to him, I was the sacrifice. You wanted this, they told you you could have it all, I was the sacrifice, your soul belongs to them now, you're on your own. However, so Jack does start crying, I will give him that. He starts crying, but it's one of those really fun, careful what you wish for things. Definitely like monkey's paw-esque, I would say. So she's sitting there and she's unable to breathe. And she does a really good job of sounding out of breath and just like struggling. However, it sounds like she's kind of like as if someone has burned her lungs, which is what you would assume people with lung cancer sound like. That's not been my experience. However, I don't expect everybody to know that. But she does sound really out of breath. She does a really good job of just sounding like she's struggling to breathe. And that must be really frustrating on set, because you're like, I gotta remember these lines, but also I gotta make it seem like this. So good for her. She does a really good job with that. She also looks way too fabulous for a dying woman. Just like way too fabulous. I don't know how to explain that better, but she's way too beautiful, way too fabulous to be on her deathbed. People on their deathbed do not look great, and she looks fucking phenomenal. And I think that's because A, she's not actually dying in real life, but also B, she's beautiful. But yeah, just crazy. So she wants him to do her one last favor, because he's like, I love you, and she's like, if you love me, do this last thing for me. And so she wants him to kill her. So he grabs the dagger that had been sitting on the side table and plunges it into her chest, and boom, everything changes. We're back on set. Lily has just been stabbed. Everyone who remains in the studio is either dead or Jack. And Jack says the words Carmichael had said earlier to snap everyone out of his hypnosis. So he's like sitting there mumbling, sleeper here awake, dreamer here awake, whatever. But of course it doesn't work. And so Jack Delroy has become famous for this incident that happened. We see end transmission, the screen goes black, we get end transmission, and then the words change to so it is done, and then they change back to end transmission. So essentially, this has been a long time coming. Before Lily was even born, they had this demon that was set on Earth to do Abraxas's will. Lily is the sacrifice, but also so is Madeline, because Lily is the sacrifice for Jack making it to where he wants to be. So in order to get the job, he had to sacrifice Madeline. In order to be number one, had to sacrifice Lily on live television. And Lily earlier said, you know, I have a feeling you'll be very famous soon. Who would not be super fucking famous for killing everyone on set? Because, like, they're going to come and they're not going to believe, like, the police and the FBI or whatever the fuck are going to come and they're not going to believe that some demon did all that. So they're going to think Jack did it. He's going to be institutionalized. Guy's fucked up. He's crazy. He's a serial killer. So obviously he's super fucking famous. Again, careful what you wish for. Read the fine print, y'all. Control is an illusion. That's kind of the underlying tones of this movie, if there are any. But there's really, like I said, it's not like a thought-heavy movie, so you can just enjoy it if you want to enjoy it, or you can read into it if you want to read into it. There's no, like, there are certain movies that you can tell right from the get, you know, opening shots or whatever, that they're going to be thought-heavy. They have tons of meaning. This one is mostly just fun, and it's a good time. There are some effects, like I said, not that great, but it is worth a watch, and I enjoyed it. I think it's a lot of fun. I think the acting is phenomenal, even just to watch for Leo and Gus, because there's some, I didn't mention everything that happens between everyone on set, because then I would just be rereading the script, but it's just so good. It's so good. And the other thing of note, too, that I think is really interesting about this movie is that people theorize the title is actually referring to Jack, because he's the one who invited the devil onto the set. He is the devil on set, basically. Like, he's the one, and you can even see there's a shot of him standing in front of the Night Owls logo, and it looks like little horns behind his head. So, very interesting, very fun. So, yeah, there's no really trigger warnings again. It's a good time. So, thank you, everyone, for listening. Sorry, once again, for the prolonged silence. I will hopefully be back at the end of this month, the last Tuesday of this month, to do another podcast review. I will be gone in June for a hot ticket. That might make June's release of the podcast a little bit later. It might push it back some. I'm also planning to do a review of The Prettiest Girl in the Grave by Christopher Triana, which is a horror book review. So I've already read that once. I want to read it one more time. Just to get my thoughts a little bit more together on it. But it's an excellent read. There's no major trigger warnings, so if you are into gore, if you are into spooky shit, if that's what you're after and you don't mind reading it to get to it, definitely recommend that, and then I'll be doing a review on it, like I said. Thank you once again. Everybody have a lovely, lovely week, lovely month, lovely year, lovely life. And hopefully, I'll see you next time. But this has been the Beware the Moon podcast.